Mental health. Okay, the second one is mental health. स्टार्टिंग से करा दो, ठीक है सर. So today we'll be starting our revision courses. These revision courses are specifically designed for you. Today we'll be discussing the chapter Human Health and Diseases. We'll be bringing up more revision courses for you, especially for class 12 CBSE students. So this revision series will be totally based from your NCERT, and I hope this will be really extremely useful for you. So let's start with the chapter that is Human Health and Diseases. So first of all, what is health? How do we define health? Most of all, we say that health is just the well-being, right? Well-being or just the absence of diseases. We often associate health with the physical well-being, but a healthy individual should not just be physically all right, meaning there is no diseases that are present, but he should also be societally adjusted. Not being able to adjust with your society can lead to a lot of problems, issues, can worsen your mental health, right? So it is equally important to sync with the societal norms, to fit in with the society, the feeling of being wanted, right? And then we have the mental well-being as well. Mental health is also equally important. You study well for your exams, but just a day before that you start feeling stress, anxiety, due to which your gut health may worsen, and it may lead to you doing the exams really not well. So it's equally important to focus on the mental health aspect as well. Okay, so health in general is defined by all these three criteria. You should be physically healthy, you should be societally acceptable, you should be able to fit in with your society, and also you should also consider your mental health as well. So that is what human health is. So how does the NCERT define health? NCERT tells us that health is not just an absence of diseases. Rather, what is it? It is defined as a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being, right? The well-being is defined with all the three criteria. When a person is healthy in all three criteria, then only we'll call that person a physically healthy individual. Now, when people are more healthy, they are more productive, they are more efficient, right? So, as in a society, they contribute more. So, it is very important that people should be healthy so that they can be more productive and they can bring more economic prosperity to our country, to our society. They can contribute more, right? And it also increases the longevity of people, right? Our lifespan increases, longevity of people increases. So in countries where there is all the three criteria are met, where there is less work hours, where people are more, do not encounter much stress, there people live longer, right? It also reduces infant and maternal mortality, right? Infant and maternal mortality rate is decreased in a healthy society. So we have defined what health is, what all the criteria that define health, right? So second thing that we'll come to is we'll define two types of diseases. Okay. So basically we can club diseases into two broad categories. There is infectious diseases and then there is non-infectious diseases. Okay. So what is an infectious disease? Infectious diseases are communicable diseases that can spread from a person who is already infected to another healthy person. These are communicable or infectious diseases. They are also known as communicable diseases, and these, because they are communicable, means they can be transmissible, right? They are transmissible. They can spread from one person to another. They can spread from infected person to healthy person, right? Whereas in case of non-infectious diseases, these diseases do not spread. These diseases are not transmissible. They cannot spread from an infected person to an healthy individual, right? So they do not pass on from one person to another. Okay, so infectious diseases, they are caused by pathogens. These pathogens can be viruses, bacteria, protozoans, right? Any of these pathogens can act as a pathogen, right? So second, we have, in case of non-infectious diseases, they are caused by factors such as genetics, your environment, your lifestyle, right? So these are caused by environment, genetics and lifestyle. Here we do not have a pathogen, but rather it is the composition of your genes that leads to exhibition of a particular diseased phenotype, right? It is the environment that you live in. Exposure to a lot of passive smoking can result in non-infectious disease also. It can negatively affect your health, right? And also lifestyle. It is equally important to have a healthy lifestyle, right? So all these factors contribute to the development of non-infectious diseases. Okay. So how is an infectious disease transmissible? It is transmissible through direct contact or through certain medium. We'll be looking more at these. What is these mediums that can lead to spread of diseases? Infectious diseases is not transmissible, right? Non-infectious diseases is not transmissible. Even when you are sitting in close contact with this person, these diseases cannot be spread, right? Okay. Now let's talk about some examples. Examples of infectious diseases include influenza, chickenpox, measles, herpes, colds. All these are examples of infectious diseases. These can spread, right? What about non-infectious diseases? Examples of these include Down syndrome, hemophilia, skin cancer, cardiovascular diseases, right? Down syndrome is a genetic disorder. It cannot be spread. It's leading to trisomy of 21st chromosome, right? So it's not something that can be spread just because you're sitting with that person. And then we have hemophilia. Hemophilia is an X-linked disorder, right? Then we have cancer, cardiovascular diseases, congenital diseases, genetic disorders. These cannot be spread. Cancer, I think, is one of the most leading non-infectious diseases, right? So we have talked about the difference between infectious and non-infectious diseases. Next, we'll be moving on to pathogens. Now, when we are talking about infectious diseases, there we looked at a certain term, that is pathogen. What is a pathogen? Now, pathogen is any organism that causes a disease. They are disease-causing organisms. They have the capability to produce a disease. These are specifically termed as pathogens. These are disease-causing organisms. Okay. And because they cause a disease phenotype, they are actually harming their host, right? They are harming their host. Now, these pathogens may live inside the host or outside the host, right? We can say these pathogens are sort of parasites, that they are surviving on the host, deriving nutrition from them, right? So they can enter our body, right? So if they are living inside the host, they have to enter the body. Now, how do pathogens enter the body? It's very simple. Do the different openings in our body. They can enter when we breathe, when we respire. They can enter through our nose, through contaminated food and water, right? So there are different routes through which pathogens can enter our body. By different means, they can enter our body. Once they enter our body, what is their next aim? They aim to multiply. they multiply, they increase in number. And next, what is that? That is leading to a diseased phenotype. It is interference. They're interference with our normal vital activities, right? They're interfering with our physiology. That results in morphological and functional damage, right? There's a lot of morphological and functional damage that is resulting due to these pathogens. Now, pathogens have to live in an environment that is totally opposing them, right? We have stomach acids, we have mucus in our respiratory tract. All of these tries to stop pathogen from infecting our body. So they have to sort of overcome all these barriers. So they have a lot of adaptations that help them to live within the host. What sort of adaptations are there? Like, they must be able to survive in the stomach where there is low pH. There is a low pH in the stomach. So they should have some kind of adaptation. Maybe a cyst or a thick covering that helps them to survive within the stomach, right? They should be able to resist various digestive enzymes, should have something like hooker or rostrilum to stick on to the intestine, right? So there is a lot of adaptation that is required by these pathogens so that they can survive inside the host body. So we have discussed about pathogens. Next is, let's look at some of the disease that is being caused by these pathogens. So in your NCERT, there is a lot of pathogenic diseases that they have discussed. I have clubbed it into bacterial, viral, so that it's much more easier for us to revise this. Okay. So first we'll be discussing about bacterial diseases. Bacterial diseases are caused by bacteria and we'll be studying each one in detail. Okay. So bacterial diseases include diseases like dysentery, plague, diphtheria, right? All these are bacterial diseases. So the first one we are going to discuss is typhoid, right? Typhoid. Now, the causative organism of typhoid is Salmonella typhi, which is a bacterium. Salmonella typhi, this causes typhoid. Okay. Now, what are the symptoms associated with typhoid? The most characteristic, I guess, is the rashes that you get. You get roses like rashes in the body, right? That are very characteristic of typhoid. Now, when a person has typhoid, what are the symptoms that he exhibits? There is sustained high fever, there is weakness, stomach pain, right? There is loss of appetite. These are all more generalized sort of symptoms, right? But what are the main ones? Sustained high fever and rose-shaped kind of patches that or rashes that you get in your body. Okay. And in severe condition, if treatment is not done for these disease, if there is a late diagnosis, what may happen is intestinal perforation may happen. These bacteria may perforate. Perforate means create pores in your intestine, and as a result they may lead to intestinal perforation and even death may result. If proper treatment is not done, then the individual can also die. Okay. Now, how does this particular bacterial infection get transmitted? It gets transmitted through fecal-oral route. Basically, these pathogens, they enter the small intestine. How do they enter the small intestine? Through contaminated food, right? Through contaminated food and water. Okay. So Salmonella typhi enters through contaminated food and water, right? And once they enter our small intestine, they can migrate to other organs as well. Okay, so how do we diagnose this disease? It is diagnosed with the help of test known as Widal test. It is diagnosed with the test known as Widal test. Okay, so to summarize, typhoid is caused by Salmonella typhi, that is the causative organism. This test can be diagnosed by the use of Widal test, and the most characteristic symptom is sustained high fever and rose-shaped patches that you get. Okay. Now let's move on to our second disease that is also bacterial disease, that is your pneumonia. Pneumonia. Okay. So pneumonia has their causative organisms as Streptococcus pneumonia and Haemophilus influenzae, right? Two bacteria that can cause pneumonia is Streptococcus pneumoniae and your bacteria Haemophilus influenza. These are the two bacteria that can cause pneumonia, right? So what are the symptoms that are associated with pneumonia? The symptoms include fever, high fever, chills, cough, right? Headache. All these are the symptoms that are associated with pneumonia. You get a lot of coughs, your lungs, they start to fill with fluid, right? And when your lungs, they start to fill with fluid, your respiratory function starts to go down. You are not able to breathe as efficiently. We know that in the lungs, there are these sac-like structures known as alveoli, right? And in the alveoli, there is increased surface area that helps us to breathe properly. Now, when fluid sorts of start filling them, the surface area starts to get decreased, right? Because of the accumulation of the fluid, there is decreased surface area. And decreased surface area can lead to breathing problems. You are not able to breathe as much efficiently as you did, right? So it can lead, in severe cases, it can even lead to your lips and your fingers turning grey to bluish in color, right? If it is treated, if it is not treated for long, it is not diagnosed, then the person may end up having blue colored nails and lips as well. Okay. So what is the mode of transmission? Here the mode of transmission is through aerosols. When an infected person sneezes, the aerosols that is emitted can be transmitted, right? A healthy person acquires them through infection by inhaling the droplets or aerosols that are released by an infected individual, right? And even by sharing of utensils and glasses from an infected person, right? So if an infected person sneezes on, and if there are certain utensils out there and these are used by an healthy individual, that can also lead to transmission of that disease. Okay? And this we have already discussed that as a result of infection, the alveoli gets filled with fluid, right? And as a result, the person is not able to respire properly. Okay. So here we have discussed bacterial diseases that are mentioned out in your NCERT. We have discussed their causative organisms, their symptoms, mode of transmission, and other important points as well. Okay. So next we'll move on. So we have studied bacterial. Next we'll move on to viral. Okay, so in viral diseases we have common cold. Now common cold is very common, right? We all may have suffered from this. Unlike pneumonia, it does not affect our lungs. Rather, it is the conducting zone where your virus, that is your rhinovirus, that is the causative organism, inhibits. They do not go to your lungs. So there is no permanent damage to your lungs that is happening, right? So they only inhibit your conducting zone. They do not travel to your lungs. Now in this case, what are the symptoms? The symptoms include nasal congestion, discharge, sore throat, hoarseness, cough, headache, tiredness, and it usually lasts for a 1 week maximum, and then we get better, right? Okay. Now we know that this rhinovirus is highly transmissible, right? So what is the cause of transmission? It is again droplets. The aerosols that an infected person releases is the main result or main cause of mode of transmission. It can also be transmitted through contaminated objects that the infected person is utilizing, right? So what are the other points to remember? As I've told you, they infect the nose and respiratory passage, but they do not go and destroy or inhibit your lungs, right? That is why even though it is very infective, a lot of us catch common cold, but we get ourselves, treated without even going to a doctor. We get well very soon, we recover very soon from this common cold. Okay, so next we will move to protozoan disease. We have discussed bacterial, we have discussed viral. Next we will be discussing protozoan diseases. Protozoan diseases are diseases caused by protozoans. Okay. The first one we will be discussing is malaria. Malaria. Now there are a lot of regions where malaria is prevalent, right? So Malaria is caused by protozoans, right? And the main infectious organism here is your Plasmodium, right? Plasmodium. Now Plasmodium is a protozoan and it has a vector, that is your mosquito, right? Plasmodium has 3 species. We have Plasmodium falciparum, your Plasmodium vivax, right? Out of all these, the most fatal one is falciparum. Falciparum is the most fatal one. Okay, the most common one that we have is vivax, and the most fatal one is falciparum. Okay. So what is happening in malaria? To understand that, we'll have to look at a diagram. So before coming on to that, this protozoan disease is caused by Plasmodium that has certain 3 species of its own, right? And for this particular protozoan to complete its life cycle, it requires 2 hosts. It requires man as well as it requires a vector, that is your mosquito. So we'll take the help of a diagram and understand the process better. Now this diagram shows us the life cycle of Plasmodium, right? The life cycle of Plasmodium. So first of all, what is happening is these mosquitoes that are acting as the vector have Plasmodium inside the salivary glands. The salivary glands of mosquitoes have these Plasmodium in the form of sporophytes. They exist in the salivary glands in the form of sporophytes, sporozytes. Okay. So when these mosquitoes, and which mosquitoes especially, only the female, okay, it is only the female mosquito. Okay. So when this female mosquito comes and bites an healthy individual, what is going to happen is, with its saliva, some amount of sporozytes will also be transferred to the healthy individual. As you can see here, when the mosquito is biting and the human, the sporozytes will be released from their salivary gland, right? And it will be injected with the bite. Okay, so you can see how during a blood meal, these sporozoids are transferred to the human host. Okay. So once inside the human, what is happening? Let's take a look. Okay, these sporocytes, they will first travel to your liver. In the liver, they are going to reproduce asexually. They are going to multiply asexually, right? They are going to multiply, increase in number asexually in the liver cells. Okay. So once they have reached liver cells, they started to multiply this, they will migrate on to your RBCs. From liver, they will again migrate to your RBCs. In the RBCs, for some short period of time, they will start to multiply asexually and they are just increasing their number. So when they are inside the RBCs and increase their number, they are going to cause rupture of the RBCs. They will cause rupture of the RBCs. And when RBC is ruptured, it leads to production of a chemical, hemozoin. Right? Hemozoin chemical is released, and this chemical hemozoin is responsible for the chills that you observe. The chills that you get during malaria are due to this chemical that is released on rupturing of RBCs. Okay. So here you can see the parasite will continue to first asexually reproduce in liver cells, then it will move to RBCs. And RBCs, it will first reproduce asexually for some time, right? And it will simply increase in number. Next we'll move on to sexual stage. This sexual stage again happens in the RBCs, right? In sexual stage, it will result in production of gametocytes. Here you can see female and male gametocytes are produced, right? So next, what is happening? Now these gametocytes are produced and present in the human host. अभी वो कहाँ पे है? Human host में present है. Now what is going to happen is the female mosquito during a blood meal, they will come and inject the human, and during this blood meal they will take up these gametocytes again. Okay. So from the blood these gametocytes are taken up by the mosquito during a blood meal. So again these gametocytes of Plasmodium travel to the mosquito. Okay. So inside the mosquito's gut, what they have shown is the mosquito's gut, right? Inside the mosquito's gut, these gametocytes, they will fuse, they will fertilize, right? And fertilization and development, as it's written, fertilization and development will take place that will lead to production of sporozoites. These sporozoites that are produced in the gut will migrate to the salivary gland of mosquito. Okay, so here you can see this is the salivary gland. Inside the salivary gland are those sporozoites that have been produced, right? And these sporozoites, one thing is very written crystal clear, that these are the infective stages. So if a question comes, what is the infective stage of Plasmodium, you should know that it is the stage of sporozoites, right? There is a lot more stage of your Plasmodium that is not mentioned. The one that we are concerned with is sporozoites. Sporozoites are the infective stage in which it can be infective and can be transmitted. Okay. So once these sporozoites are formed in salivary glands, next time the female mosquito is going to feed on another human being, taking a blood meal, relaxing itself, it is going to transfer these sporozoites to the human again, okay? And the cycle is going to continue like this, okay? Okay, so next we'll be looking at, okay, so let's come back and just go through over this. So we have seen how the rupture of RBCs is releasing a toxic substance known as hemozoin. This hemozoin, I told you, is responsible for all the chills that we get, right? So, and the infectious stage is sporozoites, and in this case the vector is the female Anopheles mosquito. It is the vector. So your vector in case of malaria is the female Anopheles mosquito. And what is the causative organism? It is Plasmodium. Okay. So next we will be discussing at emboic dysentery. Emboic dysentery. It is again a protozoan disease. So what is the causative organism? It is Entamoeba histolica. Entamoeba histolica is the causative organism for this dysentery. Okay. So what are the symptoms that we can see? Diarrhea, right? Diarrhea, constipation, abdominal pain and cramps. A lot of cramps, abdominal pain is associated with this. And in this case, the stools, they will have excess mucus and blood. Okay. There will be excess mucus and blood in the stools as well. So this is a characteristic of this disease. Okay. So what is acting as a vector? In this case, the vector is your house flies. The vector of Entamoeba histolica is your houseflies that are acting as mechanical carriers, right? So what happens is they can transmit the parasite from feces of infected person, right? They can transmit the feces from an infected person, right? So when they are sitting on the feces of an infected person, they are going to carry these parasites, and then when they land on any particular food source, they may lead to transmission of those parasites into food. That is why it is important to cover your food when you are not eating, right? So these were some of the points about the Plasmodium. So in the next course, in the second part, we may look more about this chapter. We have just looked at some of the diseases. We have looked about some of the diseases, that is bacterial. We have looked at viral diseases. We have also looked at your protozoan diseases. In the next class, we'll be looking more about other diseases. We'll be talking about cancer, autoimmune disorders, and we'll cover up all these topics, and it will be more fast forward revision courses. So please hang on with me. Okay, so it's all for today's class. Thank you.